So please welcome Rob Opsomer, Executive Lead for Plastics and Finance from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, to the keynote stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. I must say, it does feel a little surreal to be here in Seattle, given we were, with the four of us, just a couple of days, all in Paris. John asked before, are you still awake? How are you?
Riding the waves of exhaustion.
Excellent. But I'm really, really happy to be here again with all of you. Erin, I promised to get your title right, so I'll try to do that. So, Erin, VP and Head of Plastic Waste at WWF. Liz Nichols, who's Foreign Affairs Officer at the US State Department. And then Allison, who's a Global VP for Packaging Sustainability at Mars. So, Erin, actually, I wanted to start with you. We were all in Paris last week. What were we actually doing there? Why were we there? The treaty, what is it all about?
Yeah. So as John mentioned, I think for those of you who were here last year, I stood on the stage talking about this life-changing moment, really, that happened in March of last year when all of the UN member states unanimously agreed to adopt a resolution that would allow us to negotiate a global treaty to end plastic pollution. And I implored at that time for businesses to get involved, to be engaged. And that's because treaties come about and are necessary when there is urgency and the need for alignment, global alignment, to really tackle something. And we've got these great studies out that say if we just continue with business as usual, we're going to have twice as much plastic produced in less than 2 decades, and 3 times as much will enter our oceans and our ecosystems. So there's quite a bit of urgency, right? And in the past 5 to 10 years, we have been proliferating voluntary initiatives, right? Businesses setting major global targets, the global commitment. We have had collective action. We've had governments putting out policies. But what has not happened is us slowing down plastic pollution. We truly need this global alignment on how we're going to, as a global community, address this shared threat. And more importantly, there has never been a major global crisis, environmental or not, that has been solved without that global alignment, right? That is us coming together as a world and saying, all right, here's what we're going to all do. Here's what we're not going to do. And there's some really good examples of these that we can learn from. Montreal Protocol, that was scientists raising the alarm about ozone depleting substances, and the UN member states agreed on a list of problematic substances, these ozone-depleting substances that we could set a path to reduce production and use of. We have other examples like Basel, and that's about transparency. You all are masters of supply chains if you're in business in the private sector, right? It's really hard to manage what you can't see within your supply chain, and therefore it's really hard to manage materials as they pass through these global supply chains without understanding what they are and assuming that we're going to get high-level secondary materials out of them if we don't, right? There's other examples, but really, at the end of the day, what we want to end plastic pollution is alignment from the world on what we're going to start with, right? How are we going to agree to play in this space? How are we going to agree to set measurable targets together and measure progress, have milestones? How are we going to have specific measures for really promoting circular systems like reuse and recycling? And how are we going to align on what's problematic in the system, what's high risk, and not just from a waste perspective, but really looking through the whole life cycle of plastic. Where is it problematic? Where is it causing human and environmental concerns? So, this second Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting, which we call INCs, was the second of 5. The next one will be this fall. It's fast because another thing they agreed on last March was that they were going to do it in 2 years. So that's quite swift, but definitely at the speed that the world and our planet needs. So we'll get into more Q&A tomorrow at the second panel, which will be primarily engagement. So if you have more questions, but hopefully that'll start us out with some level setting for this conversation.
Well, thanks so much, Erin, also for pitching the panel of tomorrow. That's excellent. So if I paraphrase, really, I mean, it's clearly a big deal, and it will impact everyone in this room one way or another, this global treaty. Now, Liz, if we go back to last week, we were there in Paris, the second session of the INC, the second out of 5. Do you feel, you representing the State Department, that the week that INC met what you had expected from it?
Thanks very much, Rob. I only have to go back to yesterday. I just got back like 12 hours ago. Well, thanks for setting the stage, Erin, also. I think that overall, absolutely, this last week was a complete success, probably for 3 different reasons. So as Erin had said, we're the second of 5 meetings in this process. And this is, what you've seen on TV, UN treaty talks. But each of those meetings is supposed to be a little bit different. So the second in the series is typically when governments would come together, articulate their views 1 tick more in a detailed fashion, often with a little bit of something to react to. Those views will get recorded, and then those will all go into, ideally, ultimately a request that we make to the Secretariat of the process for a 0 draft. And that will be a literal rough draft of a treaty text with all of the options, the many different options that folks have tabled. So the first thing to say is we did manage to request a 0 draft. And that's a big deal because that was not guaranteed. I think it was a week of, maybe even historic kind of drama and procedural meanderings. I think the second thing I wanted to say is that I think that this week was also a success because it helped clarify where some of the divisions are and where they are not. So without having a lot of context to go on, I think we've all seen also in the media that there's been kind of this rote sort of play up of United States versus European Union in views. And we've seen that film before. It's kind of a standard thing that happens at these bodies. But what we saw this last week was the development of a really broad and coordinated coalition of countries. 16 at least intervened on the mic, but we think it's up to about 40 who reacted to the documentation for this week and the process that's been set out so far with a huge degree of concern and skepticism that their voices weren't being taken into account. And I think that we can safely say that while there's diversity in that group, those voices and what they're looking for out of this are at a different place on the ambition gradient. And so one additional thing I think that came out of this week was a little bit of a reclarification of the narrative that the U.S. and the European Union and others who have joined the high ambition coalition, the ambition level is the same, end plastic pollution by 2040. The governance paths that we have available to us are really different. So different roads, but the same Rome. So I think that was helpful. And maybe the very last thing I'd say is that we've seen before, the United States tends to play a kind of uniquely constructive role in this. It's a thing we do and that we're very good at. And we had the opportunity to put a lot of that on display this week. The US unlocked the 2 big dramatic sticking points. And so I think we've set a good tone for being a collaborative partner for the few meetings ahead.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Liz, and also for your leadership on this topic. Now, I can imagine for some people in the audience listening to this, and thanks for also unpacking some of the actual, like what actually happens in those meetings and listening to things like 0 drafts and procedural wranglings. This is a very different world than the world that most of us in the room, including myself, are used to operate in. And it's a world that's run by diplomats and negotiators. So really keen to hear your perspective, Allison, engaging in this process as a business. How has that been for you?
Yeah, I would describe last week in Paris as everything, everywhere, all at once, because it was crazy. Last year when Erin and WWF asked industry to get involved, we were like, yes, but how? Well, we want to get involved, great, but how? And then will they actually listen to us, right? We weren't sure how we would engage, because in some of the examples that you gave earlier, industry voice wasn't maybe as welcome as the treaty process is welcoming industry voice. So there was a really great coordination effort by WWF and by EMF to establish a business coalition, which kind of organizes a bunch of the companies from industry to say, how can we have a really strong united voice to input into this treaty process? So just a little bit about the business coalition. It was an amazing experience to be part of. I'm sorry, can I go one slide back, please? The vision for the business coalition, first, it has over 100 companies. So that was really exciting to be part of this great thing that's bigger than yourself, with 100 companies coming together with a united voice to industry, to NGOs, to government about what we wanted to see in a global treaty. We wanted an ambitious, effectively and legally binding treaty. And again, we were convened by Ellen MacArthur and WWF. And it was really a good way to help coordinate us, again, 100 different companies across multiple different industries. And you can see the wide array of industries that were represented and figure out what is the best way for us to have our positions heard. And what was really amazing, there was a couple of times Erin and I were walking in between events and we literally felt goosebumps, right? Like, I'm very fortunate that in my day job, I get to have a pretty big impact on packaging sustainability. But being at the Plastics Treaty and being part of this business coalition is that at a whole nother level. You're working with 100 different industry peers in a coordinated way to be able to discuss some very important points with government delegates that will really impact the future of this industry. So that was really exciting. And I just gave some examples here of ways that we were able to engage. Some pictures, we were able to give statements during the plenary. We were invited to speak in side events. We were meeting with delegates in between sessions, and really inspiring. There was a 12-year-old who actually spoke in front of the plenary, and that was another goosebump moment to see how he made a plea for his generation and making sure that we're considering their future as we look at a treaty to end plastic pollution. So a lot of once in a lifetime goosebump raising moments, and encourage everybody to look at the Business Coalition. We'll give a little bit more information later if you want your voice to be heard as part of this process.
Well, thanks so much for that, Allison. And I just want to spend a moment still on that the importance of business engaging in this process and how unique that is. And I was at just before the formal week kicked off in Paris, was at a ministerial event where a couple of ministers from countries really all over the world made that point. And I just noted down one quote that I wanted to share with you. So one of the ministers got on stage and said that it's really unique in a global agreement that there is such strong support by business right from the start of the process. And this provides a really strong foundation for an ambitious and speedy resolution of the process. So it really does matter. And thanks again, Allison, also for your leadership on that. Now, I don't know how you're feeling about this. When I'm hearing you speak, I hear life-changing moments, I hear goosebumps. I'm starting to get really fired up about this process. And it's actually also, I think, what's important to note, those processes may have the image of being slow, but this one is actually going really, really very fast. We're running 6 monthly sprints now. We've had 2 in the run-up to the first session, the second session. There's 3 more, and then it's done. So it's really happening now. So with all of that in mind, if we imagine everyone in the room is kind of feeling it, fired up, and it's happening now, what could people in the room do? How can we engage? Erin, over to you first.
Well, I think last year I said that this was an opportunity for legacy, right? It's very rare in sustainability, in conservation, to be able to see the result of your advocacy, your influence to drive such holistic change. Like that is basically unheard of in this space. And so right now, businesses have a chance to shape it and partner with these member states to do this, right? And so maybe you don't want to get involved at that level because it's big and it can be overwhelming and lots of goosebumps and sometimes very frustrating. But I think just like coming from some of the notes that John was mentioning in his quick talk, where he said, it's time to unlearn, right? There are actions you can take in your organizations today, right? Thinking truly about moving to a circular economy. He also said with coming to terms with change, I got to be honest, no matter what this treaty looks like, whether it is as ambitious as WWF wants it to be or some other version, it's going to change the way we do business. That is happening. So it's time to really get comfortable with that and think about your industry, your business, your sector, and what that means for you, and either get involved in shaping that circular economy or be ready for what comes down as a result of that. Because it is something that is happening. And then I would say, take action. Don't wait for that. You're already seeing just the negotiations themselves are catalyzing policy. They're catalyzing action. So don't wait around. And even if you're not in plastics, if you're in another sector, we're talking about municipal solid waste, whatever material you use, it is going to be impacted by this. It is going to trickle to apparel and to all other things. So it's coming, which is great because that's why we're here. We want to move from linear and go big, right? Seed the change within your organizations and when you have the power to, because I think we don't really have a lot more time to waste. So.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Erin. And I want to take the opportunity because we're already starting to head towards the end of the panel. I just want to take the opportunity to also thank you personally for the fantastic partnership on this topic. It's been really extraordinary to work together. So very clearly hearing call both to lean in to this process and actually to take action at the same time. And that's something I would very much reinforce and also just point out how they're mutually reinforcing, because it is the action that businesses are taking today that provide both many of the insights and then the actual position and the confidence to be able to influence in this process. Yeah. So thanks for that. Liz, from your point of view, what can businesses do?
Businesses can tell us what they want and what they need. I'm really grateful to Erin and Allison for their amazing engagement in our stakeholder processes in the State Department, but also all of the other 15 agencies across the government that we work with. Everyone runs some kind of process where we bring in voices from the business community, industry, civil society, NGOs, academia. If you're not on our list and you'd like to be, find me. Let me fill up your inbox. And I think the thing I'd like to say too is that the kinds of input that we want are going to iteratively shift as these negotiations develop and the window of what's possible shifts. And I guess I recognize that the US government today, we occupy a certain Overton window of what we can and cannot do. And that window is also subject to change. And the way that gets changed, without getting fired here, is for stakeholders to exert continuous change through their legislators at the federal and the state level and through their policymakers. And I make myself and the State Department available for that. And then selfishly, I'm going to put in a direct plug. So within the treaty negotiations, my specific role is to guide the U.S. in developing the financial architecture for how we put together roughly $3.4 trillion, which is what the OECD estimates is going to take to fully make a plastics transition. A lot of that is public money. Most of that is not. And so I would love to work with all of you to find ways that the private sector and all of the good internal investments you're already making in production and manufacturing and everything else, how we get those on a ledger counted towards the objectives of the agreement so we can draw direct links between action and what we're doing in those rooms. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Liz. And I think really important call out indeed to engage both internationally in the big international process, but also here in the States domestically. Allison.
Yeah, I'd echo what everybody has said so far, and Erin and Liz. Like, get ready for action, right? There's a lot of voluntary action going on right now with the EMF Global Commitment. There's a lot of voluntary action and understand what kind of reporting you can do. There's plastic packs. So get involved to understand what might be coming at a global scale in a more mandatory way. Erin mentioned that there's some industries that weren't maybe as vocal in the plastics treaty negotiations as I would have liked to see them. So if your company is involved in plastics in any way, you should get involved because this will impact you. I didn't see as many textiles, healthcare, automotive, some of the other industries as involved. So this is a plea for other industries and other organizations to get involved. And if you want to do so, you can scan this QR code. This will take you to the Business Coalition homepage so that you can sign up. It's free, so we're not asking for any money. It's just a way for your organization to get involved so that your voice can be heard in the plastics treaty. You heard from Liz, negotiators are actually asking for industry input, which is super rare. So let's take this opportunity to make sure that our voices are heard.
Well, thank you so much. So it's a big deal, the treaty. It will impact all of you. It is really worth leaning in, and there's a very, very practical next step to do so. So please do sign up to the Business Coalition. Thank you very much. Thank you.